So we're looking at more volume in this lesson, but now we're changing shape. So it's really similar to the cylinders we were looking at before. The prisms we were looking at before, but now we're looking at a cylinder. Just think of it like, instead of the Amazon box I kept referring to, this one is just like a can of soup. So the bases now are both circles. So instead of the top and bottom of the Amazon box being two rectangles, we got two circles. But because it's technically a prism, we can still use the formula for the prism. So remember, formula for the prism was the area of the base times the height. We're still going to use that. So I'm still going to use something times the height, but I can just be more specific now because the area of the base is going to be using this circle with an r. R is the radius. So pi r squared is the formula for the area of a circle. The radius is the distance from center to edge of the circle. So the middle of the circle, the center to the very edge of the circle. And I'm writing that out because, for example, when we hit number 1, this is not a radius because it doesn't start at the center and end at the edge. It goes straight across. The number 1 problem is a diameter. We will need to find the radius. Then we're still going to multiply by the height. The height, we like to think of it as like up and down distance, but that's going to fall apart in examples like number 2. So instead you need to think of the height as the distance between the circles. So if I knock that soup can over, we would still have the same height even though it's now lying horizontally. And if you remember the other notes video when we talked about oblique shapes, an oblique cylinder is just one, like a stack of pennies. I could stack it perfectly vertically or I can kind of push it sideways. You're still going to use the same formula though. So when we get to number 3, we're still going to use this pi r squared times h. So starting with number 1, we're going to find the volume. We're going to do 2 different forms. One of them is called in terms of pi, so we're going to talk about how to do this without rounding, and then one of them we're going to round. This one asks us to round to the nearest whole number. So we're going to do 2 different things. So first of all, let's write out our formula. V equals pi r squared times h. And I also want to change something. We can do more complicated problems. It's not really worth doing more complicated problems here, so let's change this diameter. Let's pretend this was an 8 instead of a 7. And the reason I'm doing this because, remember, I don't want to go straight across the top of this circle. If I'm interested in what the radius is, I want from this edge, but stopping halfway at the center. So I want half of 8. So I just changed it so it wasn't an odd number. Half of 8 would be 4. So my radius is then 4 feet. That's what I'm going to plug in here. So pi is a number. Remember, this is that 3.14-ish number that goes on forever. I'm just going to use this for now. I'll show you how to use your calculator's pi button later. Times r, which was 4. We have to multiply 4 times itself, 4 squared. And then we're going to multiply by the height, which remember was the distance from one circle to the other circle, which you can see over here is labeled as 2 feet. So now we've got 2 options that we have to cover. In terms of pi means you don't round. And that's an issue because this as a number with like 3.14 whatever, that's rounded. And I don't want to round if I have in terms of pi. So again, reminder, this means don't round. And if I cannot round, it's basically saying, hey, don't put pi in a calculator. Don't kind of use pi. It's saying take all of these other numbers and combine them, which means take 4 squared, get 16, and then multiply that by 2. I would get 32 from just the numbers portion. But pi still exists, and I do still want to multiply these numbers together. So what we do for in terms of pi is we just say it's 32 pi. Which is just saying, yeah, I do need to take 32 times pi, but I'm not going to do it yet because I don't want to round my answer. And it's just tradition to move that pi to the end of the number. It means the same thing as pi times 32, but you will always see it in our answer keys at the end. And because it's volume, I have cubic units. Now, when it says to the nearest whole number, we do need to find pi on our calculators. So let me find, why is this so dark? I have a light on in here. There we go, I can see a little something. Okay, so I'm looking for 32 pi. My, that's dark. Okay, so on the graphing calculator, you should see a pi button here, but it's not the label on the actual button. Like, I don't even know if it's bright enough for you to see, but mine is in like this blue color, which means I need to push my second key and then that button. So you'll see that it says 32 pi, which gets me 100.5. So nearest whole number, that 5 makes the 100 round up to 101. Keep in mind, if I just use 3.14 instead of pi, it's going to round down to regular 100. So always, always, always use the pi button and not a pre-rounded number. So this is about 101. If you are using an iPhone, as before, let's make sure your rotation lock is off. You actually have your phone open and turn it. So then 32 times, again, don't use 3.14. There should be a pi button on there. And then you can hit equals. You shouldn't see the pi button if you have not rotated it. So make sure you just rotate it to get the full calculator options. So again, that was 32 times pi is equal to. So we're getting that it's about 101 cubic feet. So we rounded it, and that's okay. The directions said we had to round one of these. These serve two different purposes. If you're about to go out and buy some gravel to fill in some space, like you're trying to dig like a well or something like that, you're going to be buying by the cubic foot or the cubic yard. You're going to need a number like this, where they're not going to tell you, oh, it's 14 pi in this bag of gravel. That's not how they sell things at Lowe's and Home Depot. They sell it by actual numbers. The nice thing about this is the precision. This is before you round it, and it just, if you need to do other things like convert it or find the price, this is ideal because you are not rounding things early. So that's the reason we have you do both. They're mathematically valid. They're just more useful for different things. So we'll do number 2 in the next video.